Rain lashed the empty highway like 1,000 invisible whips, turning the asphalt into a slick black mirror that reflected the fury of the storm. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ground, and lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the desolate stretch of road where nothing moved except for a small, huddled figure at the shoulder. She was just a child, no more than 6. Her soaked dress clinging to her tiny frame like a shroud. Barefoot, shivering violently, she stood alone, her wide eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, as if waiting for something or someone that would never come. Cars had sped by earlier, their drivers too hurried or too scared to stop, but now, in the dead of night, the road was a ghost town, and the girl's cries were swallowed by the wind. The roar of a motorcycle engine cut through the chaos like a blade. Caleb Ward, 41, and weathered by years on the open road, throttled down as his headlights swept over the scene. His iron promise patch gleamed faintly on his leather vest, rain beading off the worn threads. He'd been riding solo that night, chasing the storm to clear his head from old ghosts, when the sight hit him like a punch. He pulled over hard, boots splashing in puddles as he killed the engine. The girl didn't flinch at the noise. Instead, her gaze locked onto him with a desperate intensity that made his stomach twist. "Hey, kid," he called softly, voice gravelly from disuse, as he approached with hands raised. "You okay? Where's your folks?" She didn't answer, just stared. Tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks, her small fists clenched at her sides. Up close, she looked even smaller, fragile as a sparrow in the gale. No backpack, no phone, just the mud-caked remnants of what might have been a school uniform. Caleb shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders, despite the chill it left on his tattooed arms. The fabric dwarfed her, but she grabbed the edges immediately, pulling it tight like a lifeline. She whispered finally, her voice barely audible over the downpour. "My name's Maya." Caleb nodded, crouching to her level, the scent of wet leather and gasoline mingling with the earthy smell of the storm-soaked earth. "All right, Maya, I'm Caleb. Let's get you out of this rain." He glanced around. No signs of an accident, no taillights in the distance. His bike wasn't built for two, especially not with a child. But leaving her here wasn't an option. Scooping her up gently, he felt her tense, then relax against his chest, her head nestling into the crook of his neck, as if she'd known him forever. The warmth of her small body against his cut through the cold, stirring something deep and forgotten in his chest, a promise he'd buried years ago. Sirens wailed in the distance as emergency lights pierced the gloom. A state trooper's cruiser skidded to a halt behind them, followed by an ambulance. Caleb held Maya steady on the back of his bike, her arms wrapped around his waist like a vice. The first responder, a burly paramedic named Ruiz, approached with a blanket. "Sir, we'll take it from here. Child Services has been alerted." But as Ruiz reached out, Maya shrieked, burying her face deeper into Caleb's back. Her grip tightened, nails digging into his shirt, and she began to sob uncontrollably. "No, him, only him!" The trooper, a stern woman with rain-slicked hair under her hat, shone a flashlight over them. "Miss, it's okay. We're here to help. What's your last name, sweetie? Where do you live?" Maya shook her head violently, words tumbling out in fragments. "Don't know. Lost. Storm came. Only remember him." She pointed a trembling finger at Caleb, who stood frozen, the weight of her words settling like lead in his gut. The paramedic tried again, offering a stuffed animal from the ambulance kit, but Maya recoiled, screaming, until Caleb murmured reassurances, his hand gently patting her back. The officials exchanged uneasy glances. The girl recognized no one else, not the uniforms, not the flashing lights that should have meant safety. As the night wore on, the storm easing to a persistent drizzle, they moved to a roadside diner that doubled as a temporary shelter. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the checkered floor. Maya refused to let go of Caleb's hand, trailing him like a shadow even as social workers arrived with clipboards and questions. "She won't respond to anyone else," one of them noted, her voice laced with frustration. Caleb sat at a booth, Maya curled beside him, sipping hot chocolate from a mug too big for her hands. The warmth of the diner contrasted sharply with the chaos outside, steam rising from coffee pots, the sizzle of a grill in the back, the low hum of a radio playing old country tunes. Hours ticked by. Interviews yielded nothing, no surname, no address, no memory of parents or home. Maya's eyes, dark and haunted, kept drifting back to Caleb, as if he were the only fixed point in a spinning world. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly, her voice small but clear, "from before. The bad day." Caleb's heart stuttered. He leaned in, the scent of her damp hair, faintly like wildflowers, reminding him of another rain-soaked night years earlier. "What bad day, kid?" "The bus," she murmured, tracing a finger along the Iron Promise emblem on his vest. "It crashed, everyone screaming, but you came, pulled me out, said you'd keep me safe." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Caleb's mind reeled back to that forgotten chapter of his life. 5 years ago, on a winding mountain road, a school bus had veered off in the fog, tumbling into a ravine. He'd been riding through, part of a loose convoy of bikers heading to a rally. No one planned it. They just stopped, forming a human chain to pull survivors from the wreckage. Caleb had reached a little girl trapped under twisted metal, her face smeared with blood and dirt. He'd carried her to safety, handed her off to the medics, and vanished into the night before the authorities could ask questions. A promise whispered in the heat of the moment. "You're safe now, kid. I got you." He hadn't thought of it since, buried under layers of regret and road dust. But here she was, Maya, the same wide eyes, the same fragile trust. The social worker approached again, but Maya clung tighter, whispering, "Don't leave, promise." Caleb swallowed hard, the weight of that old vow resurfacing like a tide. In a world that had taken so much from him, his brother in the war, his faith in justice, he'd walked away from heroics, content with the brotherhood of the road. Yet now, this child saw through the scars to the man he'd been. As dawn crept in, painting the diner's windows with pale light, Caleb realized this wasn't coincidence. It was a call to honor a promise he'd all but forgotten, one that could bind them in ways neither could yet fathom. The trooper pulled him aside, her expression softening. "She's stable, but we need to find her family. You can't just—" "I'll stay," Caleb interrupted, voice steady, "until she's safe." Outside, his bike waited, raindrops glistening on the chrome like unshed tears. The road ahead stretched unknown, but for the first time in years, Caleb felt the pull of something greater than solitude, a redemption woven from leather, loyalty, and the unbreakable thread of a child's memory. The first rays of dawn filtered through the diner's grimy windows, casting long shadows across the formica tables and turning the steam from fresh coffee into ethereal wisps. Caleb sat motionless, Maya's small hand still clasped in his, her breathing steady now in the rhythm of uneasy sleep. The social worker, a woman named Elena with tired eyes and a clipboard clutched like a shield, paced nearby, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Outside, the storm had broken, leaving the world washed clean but sodden, puddles mirroring the pale sky. The air carried the sharp tang of wet asphalt, mixed with the greasy aroma of bacon from the kitchen, a mundane comfort in the face of the unfolding mystery. Caleb's mind churned like the engine of his Harley, piecing together fragments of that long-ago night. The bus crash had been chaos incarnate, metal screeching against rock, cries piercing the fog-shrouded ravine. He'd been 26 miles from nowhere, riding with a ragtag group of Iron Promise brothers, when the twisted wreckage came into view. No hesitation, they dismounted as one, chains and wrenches turned into makeshift levers. Caleb had crawled through the debris, his hands bloodied on jagged edges, until he reached her, a girl no bigger than Maya now, pinned and terrified. "Hold on, kid," he'd growled, prying the seat free. Her eyes had locked on his then, just as they did now, a spark of recognition amid the horror. He'd carried her up the embankment, her weight nothing compared to the burden he carried inside. Promises to his fallen brother, vows of loyalty that had kept him on the road, running from the man he'd failed to be. Elena cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "Mr. Ward, we appreciate your help last night, but this is a police matter now. Child Services will take her to a safe house. You can give your statement and go." Her tone was professional, edged with the wariness reserved for outsiders like him. Tattooed arms, leather vest scarred from bar fights and backroad brawls. Caleb glanced down at Maya, who stirred at the voices, her fingers tightening instinctively. "She don't know you," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "Or any of this. You saw how she reacted. The trooper from the night before entered then, shaking rain from her hat, her boots leaving muddy prints. Officer Hale, her badge glinting under the fluorescence, nodded to Elena before fixing Caleb with a measured stare. "We've run her description through the databases. No matches yet. No missing persons report fitting a 6-year-old girl in this county. It's like she appeared out of thin air." She pulled out a notepad, the pages crisp and official. "And your story checks out, but it's convenient. Lone biker stops for a lost kid, and she clings to you like your family. Ever been in trouble before? Assault? Anything with kids?" Caleb's jaw tightened, the old scars on his knuckles itching under the scrutiny. Trouble? Yeah, he'd had his share. Bar scraps over honor, a stint in county for defending a brother against a crooked cop. But nothing like this. "I pulled her from that bus 5 years back," he said, meeting Hale's eyes without flinching. "Didn't stick around for medals, just did what needed doing." Maya sat up fully now, rubbing her eyes, the oversized jacket slipping off one shoulder to reveal faint bruises like faded echoes of that crash. "He's the good one," she piped up, her voice cutting through the tension like a child's unfiltered truth. "The others, they hurt." The room fell silent, the sizzle of eggs on the grill the only sound. Eleanor knelt beside her, voice gentle. "Maya, honey, who hurt you? Your parents? Teachers?" But the girl shook her head, burrowing closer to Caleb, her small frame trembling. Fragments spilled out then, halting and dreamlike. A house with yelling voices, shadows that loomed too large, a recent storm that had torn her from whatever fragile safety she had. No names, no places, just fear woven into her words like threads of a nightmare. Hale's expression shifted, from skepticism to something akin to resolve. This could be more than a runaway. Signs of neglect, maybe worse. "We need to get her to the hospital for a check." Caleb stood, lifting Maya effortlessly into his arms, her head resting against his shoulder as if it were the most natural place in the world. The diner's bell jingled as they stepped out, the morning air crisp and alive with the chirp of waking birds. His bike gleamed under the emerging sun, chrome catching the light like a promise of motion, of escape. But escape to where? The Iron Promise Clubhouse was 2 hours north, a sanctuary of roaring engines and unbreakable bonds, yet bringing a child there felt like dragging innocence into the fray. Still, the pull was undeniable, an echo of the brotherhood that had saved him after his brother's death in the sands overseas, men who chose loyalty over blood. They rode to the hospital in the back of Hale's cruiser. Maya wedged between them, her hand never leaving Caleb's. The facility loomed on the outskirts of town, a squat building of beige brick under a sky streaked with clouds. Inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic clashed with the faint ozone of the storm's aftermath. Doctors poked and prodded gently, vitals stable, no breaks, but the bruises told a story of their own, subtle marks of a life unmarked by gentleness. "She's dehydrated, malnourished," the pediatrician reported, a kind-faced woman with a stethoscope dangling like a talisman. "And psychologically, she's fixated on you, Mr. Ward. It's rare, but trauma can imprint like that." As tests dragged on, Caleb stepped into the hallway, phone in hand. The screen lit his face in the dim light. Contacts scrolling to Jax, his road captain and oldest friend from the club. The call connected on the second ring, Jax's voice gravelly from a night of cards and whiskey. "Caleb, thought you were ghosting us after that last run?" Caleb leaned against the wall, the cool tile grounding him. "Need a favor, brother. Got a kid here, situation's twisted. She remembers me from the bus job. Authorities circling like vultures." A pause. Then Jax's low chuckle turned serious. "Say the word. We'll ride." By midday, word had spread through the Iron Promise network like wildfire on dry grass. Texts buzzed in, Caleb's phone alive with offers of support, from lawyers who'd beaten corruption charges to nurses who'd patched up more than one brother. Maya, discharged into temporary custody, watched from her bed as Caleb pocketed the device. "They're coming?" she asked, eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. He nodded, ruffling her hair. "Family's what you make it, kid, and we've got yours covered." But as they wheeled her toward a holding room, a shadow fell across the doorway. A suited man in a cheap tie, social services higher up by the look, blocked the path, his smile thin as a blade. "Mr. Ward, a word. This child's future isn't in the hands of vigilantes." The word hung heavy, laced with the disdain of institutions that bent justice to fit their rules. Caleb's hand rested on Maya's shoulder, feeling the tremor pass through her. The fight was just beginning, not with fists, but with the quiet steel of a promise renewed, one that would draw his chosen family into the storm, testing loyalties forged in fire and road. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The hospital corridor stretched like a sterile vein under the harsh glare of overhead lights, their hum a constant drone that echoed Caleb's mounting frustration. He paced slowly, boots scuffing the polished floor, the scent of bleach clinging to his clothes like an unwelcome shadow. Maya had been whisked away for more tests, her small form disappearing behind swinging doors marked with official warnings. The suited man from social services, Mr. Hargrove, his name tag read, lingered nearby, arms crossed, his polished shoes tapping an impatient rhythm. "This fixation she has on you is concerning," Hargrove said, his voice smooth but edged with authority. "Trauma bonds can be unhealthy. We'll need a full background check before any further involvement." Caleb stopped, turning to face him, the Iron Promise patch on his vest catching the light like a badge of defiance. "Background? I've got nothing to hide. Girl needs someone she trusts, and right now that's me." His words carried the weight of road-worn honesty, the kind forged in late-night confessions around campfires with brothers who'd seen too much. Hargrove's eyes narrowed, flicking over the tattoos snaking up Caleb's forearms, symbols of lost comrades, oaths etched in ink. "Outlaw types like you complicate things. We've got protocols for a reason, if there's any history of instability." Before Caleb could retort, Officer Hale appeared at the end of the hall, her stride purposeful, radio crackling faintly at her hip. She held a tablet, the screen glowing with fresh data. "Ward, got something. Partial match on the bus crash records. 5 years back, anonymous rescuer pulled 3 kids from the wreck. Description fits you. Mid-30s, leather jacket, biker build. No name given. But witnesses mentioned a group that vanished before statements. Her gaze softened slightly, the lines around her eyes deepening with reluctant respect. You were a ghost then, too. Caleb nodded once, the memory flooding back in vivid flashes. The acrid smoke from the engine fire, the metallic tang of blood on his hands, the child's whimpers fading as he passed her to waiting arms. He'd ridden away with the convoy, the road swallowing their deed like it never happened. Glory wasn't the point. Keeping a promise was the unspoken code of the Iron Promise, where loyalty trumped accolades. Did what anyone would have, he muttered. But Hale shook her head. Not anyone. Most would have waited for prose. This girl, Maya's prince, came back. No priors, but she's been in the system peripherally. Foster placements, 3 in the last year, last one flagged for unresolved issues before she vanished 2 days ago. The words landed like gravel under tires, stirring the dust of old injustices. Foster homes, places meant for safety, but too often riddled with neglect, where kids like Maya became statistics instead of stories. Caleb's jaw clenched, thinking of his own fractured youth, bouncing between relatives after his parents' crash, until the club became the anchor he'd never had. Issues. Like what? Hale hesitated, glancing at Hargrove, who interjected smoothly. That's confidential. But suffice to say, her guardians aren't in the picture right now. We'll place her in emergency care. Maya's door creaked open then. A nurse emerging with a chart. She's asking for you, Mr. Ward. Won't settle. Caleb brushed past Hargrove without a word, entering the room where pale afternoon lights slanted through blinds, striping the bed like prison bars. Maya sat up, knees drawn to her chest, the hospital gown too big and starched against her skin. Her eyes, still shadowed by exhaustion, lit up as he approached. They poked me with needles, she said, voice quivering but defiant. Said it's to make sure I'm not broken inside. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight, and offered his hand. She took it immediately, her palm warm and sticky from the IV tape. You're tougher than that, kid. Seen it myself. Outside the window, the parking lot bustled faintly. Cars splashing through residual puddles, the distant growl of engines hinting at the world moving on. But in here, time hung suspended, a fragile bubble of trust amid the beeps of monitors and the murmur of staff voices. As the afternoon wore on, fragments of Maya's story emerged in halting whispers, coaxed by Caleb's patient silence. The house was dark, she said, tracing patterns on the bedsheet. Mommy yelled a lot, then the storm came, and I ran, didn't know where. No details of violence, just echoes, the slam of doors, the sting of harsh words, a life unraveling like frayed rope. Caleb listened, his own past mirroring hers in shadowed ways, the war that claimed his brother, leaving him adrift until the roar of bikes and the grip of brotherhood pulled him back. Promises get broken easy, he told her softly, but some stick, like the one I made to you back then. Hargrove knocked then, entering with a social worker in tow, both carrying forms that rustled like dry leaves. Time to discuss next steps. Maya will go to a facility tonight. Secure, professional. But as they approached, she shrank back, clutching Caleb's arm. No, he stays. He's my promise man. The room tensed, the air thick with unspoken conflicts. Institution versus instinct, rules versus the raw pull of redemption. Hale, lingering in the doorway, cleared her throat. Give it a day. Let us verify. Kid stable because of him. Dusk fell outside, painting the sky in bruised purples. The first stars pricking through like distant hopes. Caleb's phone vibrated in his pocket. Jack's again, the road captain's text lighting the screen. Crews mobilizing, 20 minutes out. Hold the line. The Iron Promise wasn't just a club. It was a covenant, men who'd traded blood for chosen kin, honoring debts that time couldn't erase. Caleb pocketed the device, watching Maya doze, her face peaceful for the first time. This wasn't his fight alone anymore, it was theirs, a quiet uprising against a system that forgot the human cost of its red tape. But as night deepened, a new complication slithered in. Hargrove pulled Caleb aside in the waiting area, where vending machines hummed and the scent of stale coffee lingered. "Listen, there's chatter from higher up. This could draw media, lone biker savior, or liability. If you're clean, fine, but if not." The threat hung, veiled in bureaucracy, a reminder of corrupted paths where justice bent for the powerful. Caleb met his gaze, unyielding. "Test me all you want, but that girl, she's family now, and we don't abandon ours." The elevator dinged, doors parting to reveal the first wave of Iron Promise riders, leather-clad figures with vests mirroring Caleb's, engines idling in the lot like patient beasts. Jax led them, his beard streaked with grey, eyes sharp as he nodded to Caleb. "Heard the call. What's the play?" Whispers rippled through the hall as nurses peered out, the air charged with the faint whiff of exhaust seeping in. Hargrove's face paled, but Caleb felt a surge of solidarity, the kind that turned strangers into shields. This promise, reignited, would test them all, not with thunderous clashes, but with the steady honor of standing firm, weaving redemption from the threads of a child's forgotten memory. The low rumble of engines vibrated through the hospital walls like a gathering storm, drawing stares from nurses and patients alike as the Iron Promise riders dismounted in the parking lot. Jax strode through the automatic doors first, his heavy boots echoing on the tile, followed by a dozen brothers, hardened men with salt and pepper beards, faded tattoos peeking from rolled sleeves, and eyes that held the quiet fire of shared battles. The scent of rain-damp leather and motor oil trailed them, cutting through the clinical sterility like a wild wind. Caleb met them in the hallway, his posture easing for the first time that day, the weight of isolation lifting as Jax clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Told you we'd ride," Jax murmured, voice low, to avoid the prying ears of Hargrove, who hovered like a hawk at the reception desk. Maya's room felt smaller now, the beeps of her monitor syncing with the distant hum of idling bikes outside. She perked up as Caleb entered, her small face lighting with curiosity when she heard the murmur of voices. "Friends?" she asked, slipping off the bed to stand beside him, the hospital gown swishing softly. Caleb nodded, guiding her to the window where the convoy's chrome gleamed under sodium lamps, shadows dancing like guardians. "Yeah, kid. The kind that keep promises." Down below, the riders formed a loose perimeter, not aggressive but unyielding, their presence a silent statement against the faceless machinery of the system. One brother, a burly veteran named Rico with a prosthetic leg from some forgotten skirmish, leaned against his bike, scanning the lot with the vigilance of a sentry. Hargrove burst in then, flanked by two security guards whose uniforms strained at the seams, their radios crackling with urgent static. "This is a secure facility," he snapped, his thin smile cracking under the strain. "No loitering, no gangs." The word dripped with contempt, evoking images of headlines and scandals, the kind that painted men like Caleb as threats rather than lifelines. Jax, overhearing from the hall, stepped forward, his massive frame filling the doorway. "We're not here to cause trouble, Suit, just supporting one of our own. And that little one in there, she's under our watch now." The air thickened, charged with the unspoken clash, bureaucratic walls versus the raw sinew of brotherhood, where loyalty wasn't filed in triplicate but lived in the marrow. Officer Hale arrived moments later, her cruiser pulling up with a squeal of tires that splashed residual water across the curb. She pushed through the growing crowd, her face a mask of controlled exasperation, badge flashing under the lights. "Stand down, everyone! Ward, what the hell is this circus?" Caleb met her gaze steadily, Maya's hand warm in his. "It's family, officer, the kind that shows up when the system's too busy with paperwork." Hale's eyes flicked to the riders, assessing, not with fear, but a flicker of understanding, perhaps born from her own brushes with red tape that bound more than it protected. "We've got leads on Maya's last foster placement, a couple in the next county over. Routine checks flagged instability, but nothing criminal. Yet, social services wants her transferred tonight to a group home upstate." Maya's grip tightened, her voice a whisper that cut sharper than any shout. "No homes, they lock doors, yell in the dark." The confession hung, painting shadows of isolation in the room's soft glow, where the only light was the faint blue from the monitor's screen. Caleb knelt to her level, the creak of his knees echoing his resolve. "Not happening, kid. Not while I've got breath." Outside, the riders shifted, engines coughing to life in a low chorus, a reminder that they were ready to escort, to shield, to honor the vow that bound them all. Jax pulled Caleb aside, his breath smelling faintly of mint from the road gum he chewed. "Club's lawyers en route, old army buddy who eats bureaucrats for breakfast. But if they push, we ride with her. No questions." As evening deepened, the hospital's cafeteria became an impromptu war room. Fluorescent lights buzzing over styrofoam cups of bitter coffee and half-eaten sandwiches that grew cold on trays. Rico shared stories in hushed tones, his prosthetic clicking softly as he gestured. Tales of pulling a stranded family from a flood, no cameras or credit sought, just the quiet satisfaction of a debt paid. Maya, allowed to join under Hale's watchful eye, sat wide-eyed on Caleb's lap, nibbling a cookie that crumbled like fragile trust. "You all, like knights?" she asked, her innocence piercing the grim atmosphere. Jax chuckled, the sound warm as engine heat. "Something like that, Squirt. Knights on steel horses." But the peace shattered with a phone call that echoed through the hall. Hargroves, his face draining of color as he listened, then barked orders into the receiver. "Escalate? Now? Fine, get the director." He turned to Hale, voice laced with urgency. "Higher-ups are involved. This biker's history, assault charges from years back, defending some club nonsense, and now this media whisper? We can't risk it. Child safety first." The accusation stung, dredging up Caleb's past like mud from a rain-slicked road. A bar fight against a dealer preying on vets, a night in lockup that taught him the system's blind spots. It wasn't violence for its own sake, but justice carved from necessity, the kind that left scars deeper than skin. Hale pulled Caleb into a side alcove, the walls papered with faded posters of smiling families, a cruel irony. "They're painting you as unstable, Ward, that old charge. It sticks in their files. If we don't cooperate, they could freeze everything, even my investigation into the foster home." Her voice dropped, confiding the ethical tightrope she walked, torn between protocol and the gut instinct that Maya needed more than forms and facilities. Caleb's mind raced, the pull of the road clashing with the anchor of the girl's trust. "Then let us help. We've got eyes everywhere, networks that find what badges miss." A beat of silence, broken only by the distant rev of a bike, and Hale nodded faintly. "One night, I'll buy time. But if it goes south..." Night cloaked the lot now, stars veiled by city haze, the riders' taillights glowing like embers. Caleb carried Maya to a borrowed van from the club, her head heavy on his shoulder, the scent of her shampoo, faint and clean, mingling with the leather of his vest. As they pulled out, convoy flanking them like iron wings, the hospital shrank in the rear view, a symbol of battles half fought. This detour wasn't flight, but a stand, chosen family closing ranks against corruption's subtle creep, reigniting a promise that promised not just safety, but a legacy of honor etched in the miles ahead. The road whispered possibilities, tense with the moral crossroads looming, where redemption demanded more than words. It required the unyielding ride into the unknown. If this chapter moved you, smash that like button. It helps spread these stories of quiet courage far and wide. The van's tires hummed against the rain-slicked blacktop, cutting through the night like a blade through silk. The convoy's engines a thunderous escort that drowned out the world beyond. Caleb gripped the wheel, knuckles pale against the worn leather. Maya's small form buckled in beside him, her head nodding against the armrest as sleep finally claimed her. The dashboard lights cast a greenish glow over her face, softening the bruises to mere shadows, while the faint scent of hospital antiseptic lingered on her clothes, mingling with the earthy musk of the club's borrowed vehicle. Oil stains on the seats, a faint whiff of tobacco from past riders. Jax rode shotgun, his massive frame wedged into the passenger seat, scanning the mirrors for tails, the radio clipped to his belt, crackling softly with check-ins from the brothers trailing behind. "Clear so far," Jax said, his voice a low rumble, eyes reflecting the passing headlights like distant stars. "But that suit, Hargrove? He's got friends in high places. Bet they're already lighting up lines to every checkpoint between here and the clubhouse." Caleb nodded, the road unfolding ahead in a ribbon of yellow lines, flanked by dark fields that whispered of forgotten secrets. The Iron Promise Sanctuary lay north, a weathered compound ringed by pines and chain link, where engines roared like heartbeats, and loyalty was the only law that mattered. But bringing Maya there meant crossing lines, exposing a child to the raw edges of their world, where barbecues masked strategy sessions and scars told stories no badge could touch. Maya stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to the vibration of the van. "Where are we going?" she murmured, voice thick with drowsiness, her fingers instinctively seeking Caleb's sleeve. He glanced down, the warmth of her touch grounding him amid the uncertainty. "Somewhere safe, kid, with people who keep their word." She settled back, tracing the Iron Promise emblem stitched on the headrest, a fist clenched around a chain, symbol of bonds unbreakable. Outside, the convoy stretched like a steel serpent, Rico's bike leading the flank, his single headlight piercing the gloom, while others formed a protective wedge, their vests gleaming faintly under the moon's pale gaze. The air rushing through the cracked window carried the crisp bite of pine sap and distant rain, a sensory promise of refuge after the storm. Hours blurred into the quiet rhythm of the highway, the only interruptions the occasional flare of taillights or the growl of a brother pulling alongside for a visual check. Caleb's mind wandered to the fragments Maya had shared, dark houses, locked doors, voices that shattered like glass. It echoed his own ghosts, the overseas deployment where he'd lost his brother to an ambush, the shrapnel of grief that drove him to the road, seeking redemption in the Brotherhood's unyielding code. The club had been his salvation, a family forged in fire, pulling him from the abyss with outstretched hands and shared rides into dawn. Now, that same circle closed around Maya, not by blood, but by choice, a quiet defiance against a system that shuffled souls like cards in a rigged deck. Dawn crept in from the east, painting the horizon in strokes of rose and gold as the convoy crested a hill overlooking the compound. The clubhouse emerged like a fortress from the mist, red brick walls scarred by weather and time, bikes lined up like sentinels under a corrugated roof that rattled faintly in the breeze. Smoke curled from a chimney, carrying the savory hint of coffee and sizzling meat, a beacon for weary travelers. Riders dismounted with synchronized ease, forming a human corridor as Caleb eased the van through the gates, the chain link clanging shut behind them like a vow sealed. Maya pressed her face to the window, eyes wide at the sight. Women from the club's extended kin, nurses, mechanics, widows who'd lost their own, emerging from the main house with blankets and mugs, their faces etched with the same quiet resolve that defined the men. Inside, the great room enveloped them in warmth, the air thick with the aroma of fresh-baked cornbread and strong brew, walls adorned with faded photos of rides past, convoys thundering through deserts, hands clasped in solidarity. Jax's wife, Lena, a no-nonsense nurse with calloused hands from years in ERs, knelt to Maya's level, offering a stuffed bear that had seen better days. "Welcome, little one. We've got beds softer than clouds and stories to chase nightmares away." Maya hesitated, glancing at Caleb, but the kindness in Lena's eyes, unforced, genuine, drew her forward. For the first time she released his hand, accepting the toy with a tentative smile that cracked the tension like sunlight through clouds. As Maya was led to a spare room upstairs, its quilt patterned with stars to ward off the dark, Caleb gathered the core brothers around the scarred oak table. Maps unrolled like battle plans, marked with routes and potential hotspots where authorities might set up roadblocks. Foster logs say her last placement was with a couple tied to some shady dealings, debts, maybe low-level cons. Rico reported, his voice steady despite the prosthetic's faint click as he shifted. Hale texted me coordinates. Place is a run-down trailer park 20 miles east. If we dig, might find why she bolted. Jax leaned in, fingers drumming the wood, the scent of his aftershave, pine and spice, cutting the room's smoky haze. Risky. But if it's corruption keeping her bounced around, we expose it, quiet-like, no guns, just truth. Caleb stared at the map, the lines blurring with the weight of decision. Exposing the foster system's underbelly meant stirring nests of influence, cops on payrolls, officials turning blind eyes for favors. It clashed with his instinct to ride free, unburdened by crusades, yet Maya's trust anchored him, a reminder that promises weren't kept in isolation. "We do it for her," he said finally, voice resolute as the engines outside. "And for every kid they forget," nods rippled around the table. The brotherhood's silent oath renewing in the morning light that slanted through dust-moted windows, illuminating faces marked by their own redemptions. Vets healing wounds unseen, outcasts finding purpose in the roar. But as the planning deepened, an engine's distant snarl shattered the calm. Through the window, dust billowed on the approach road. A black SUV, unmarked but purposeful, flanked by two cruisers with lights flashing silently. Hargrove's doing, no doubt, the system's claws extending to reclaim what it deemed its own. Caleb rose, the chair scraping like a challenge as the convoy reformed outside, bikes kicking to life in a symphony of defiance. Maya appeared at the top of the stairs, bear clutched tight, her eyes seeking him amid the rising tension. The air hummed with anticipation, the moral storm brewing, not of fists or fury, but of unyielding honor, where chosen family stood as the last bastion against a justice corrupted by its own weight. The road ahead twisted sharper now, demanding sacrifices that would test the very promises that bound them, forging redemption from the friction of truth and loyalty. Dust swirled in lazy eddies across the gravel courtyard as the black SUV crunched to a halt, its tires biting into the earth like teeth. The two cruisers flanked it, doors swinging open with a synchronized creak, red and blue lights pulsing silently against the clubhouse walls, casting erratic shadows that danced like wary specters. Hargrove emerged first from the SUV, his suit rumpled from the drive, tie askew as if the road had tugged at his composure. Behind him, 4 officers fanned out, hands resting on holsters, postures rigid under the morning sun that now burned away the mist, turning the air thick with the scent of heated pine and exhaust. The Iron Promise riders held their ground, engines idling in a low, guttural chorus that vibrated through the ground, a living barrier of chrome and leather. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards groaning under his boots, Maya's small hand slipping into his as she peered from behind his leg. Her bear dangled from the other arm, its button eyes reflecting the tension like tiny mirrors. Jax flanked him, arms crossed over his broad chest, the club's vice patch glinting on his vest, a serpent coiled around a wrench, emblem of tools turned to purpose. Rico and the others formed a loose semicircle, not advancing but unmovable, their faces etched with the quiet defiance of men who'd faced worse than badges on a back road. The air hummed with unspoken challenge, the faint crackle of radios mingling with the distant call of a crow, a harbinger in the clear sky. "Mr. Ward," Hargrove called, his voice amplified by the open space, carrying the false calm of authority. "This ends now. The child is under state protection. Hand her over, and we can avoid escalation." His eyes darted to the riders, the convoy's numbers swelling as more bikes pulled in from the perimeter road, reinforcements drawn by the urgent texts that had flown like sparks. One officer, a young recruit with sweat beading on his brow, shifted uneasily, the weight of his gear pressing down in the rising heat. Caleb felt Maya's fingers tighten, her breath quickening against his side, the faint tremor reminding him of the fragility beneath her bravado. "No escalation needed," Caleb replied, his tone even, gravelly from a night without sleep, carrying the weight of roads travelled and promises kept. "Maya's safe here, with family." The word hung deliberate, laced with the moral clarity that cut through Hargrove's bluster. The social worker from the hospital trailed behind, clipboard in hand, her face pale as she avoided the riders' stares. Women among them now, Lena stepping forward with a protective arm around Maya's shoulders, her nurse's scrubs a stark contrast to the leather. "She's terrified of strangers," Lena added, voice steady as a pulse check. "You saw it yourself. Forcing her now? That's not protection. That's trauma reloaded." Hargrove's jaw tightened, stepping closer, the gravel crunching under his shoes like brittle bones. "Family. This is a motorcycle club, not a licensed facility. We have warrants, temporary custody orders. Your history, Ward, assault, evading authorities after that bus incident, paints a picture of instability. And now, harboring a minor. That's felony territory." The accusation landed like a thrown gauntlet, stirring murmurs from the brothers, but Caleb held steady. The sun warming his back as memories flickered, the courtroom echo after defending Jax from a frame-up, the judge's gavel sealing a suspended sentence bought with truth, not bribes. Instability? No. The system mistook scars for weakness, loyalty for threat. Officer Hale pulled up then, her cruiser nosing through the gate with a wary slowness, dust settling on the hood as she killed the engine. She approached on foot, weaving through the officers, her expression a storm cloud of conflict, loyalty to the badge warring with the ethical pull she'd felt since the diner. "Stand down, Hargrove," she said, voice cutting sharp. "I cleared this with the captain. Preliminary on the foster home, red flags everywhere. Couples got ties to unreported income. Complaints buried under administrative errors. Maya's not going anywhere until we verify." Her radio buzzed, a dispatcher's voice tinny and urgent, but she silenced it, eyes locking on Caleb. "You bikers stirring this pot could help, or blow it up. Your call." The courtyard fell into a charged hush, the engine's rumble fading to a purr as Jack signaled the riders to ease off throttles. Maya tugged at Caleb's hand, her voice a whisper that carried like wind through pines. "They want to take me back to the yelling place." Her words pierced the standoff, drawing Hargrove's gaze, his facade cracking as the human cost surfaced, not files and forms, but a child's haunted eyes. Rico stepped forward, his prosthetic legs steady on the uneven ground. Voice measured from years of de-escalating barroom flares. "We've got a sister who's a paralegal, ex-family court. She'll pull the real records, no strings. Let us ride this out with you, officer. For the kid." Hale nodded faintly, the moral compass in her tilting toward alliance, a quiet rebellion against the corruption she'd glimpsed in Hargrove's frantic calls. 24 hours. I'll run interference. But if it's clean, she stays with Ward pending review. Hargrove sputtered, phone already to his ear, but the momentum shifted, the officers' postures loosening as the sun climbed higher, baking the tension into reluctant truce. Caleb knelt, leveling with Maya, the scent of her, soap and safety, grounding him. "See? Promises hold. We're digging deeper, getting the truth." As the authorities retreated to their vehicles, engines coughing to life in defeat, the clubhouse exhaled. Lena led Maya inside, the screen door slapping shut like a punctuation, while the brothers dispersed to tasks, scouting routes, prepping the lawyer's arrival. Jax clapped Caleb's back, the gesture solid as iron. "That was close, brother, but we stood, like always." Caleb watched the SUV vanish down the road, dust trail fading into the horizon, the weight of the confrontation settling like road grit. This wasn't victory yet, just a breath before the deeper dive into shadows, where Foster ledgers hid abuses swept under rugs of indifference. By midday, the compound buzzed with purpose, the air alive with the sizzle of grills firing up for a communal lunch, burgers charring, onions caramelizing in a haze of smoke that warded off the heat. Maya explored tentatively, trailing Lena through the garden patch where wildflowers nodded in the breeze, her laughter a rare spark amid the planning. Caleb joined Rico at a laptop in the garage, the space dim and oil-scented, tools hanging like talismans. "Got a hit," Rico said, screen glowing with scanned docs. "Foster parents, debts to a local fixer, complaints from neighbors about noises at night. Girl bolted during a storm, no search mounted, smells like cover-up." The pieces aligned, a mosaic of moral rot, a system profiting from vulnerability, guardians more captors than caretakers, authorities turning blind for quiet payoffs. Caleb's resolve hardened, the old promise to Maya evolving into a crusade, not for glory, but to shatter the chains that bound innocence. As afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the yard, Hale's text arrived. "Deeper dive confirms. Push for guardianship, Ward. You've earned it." The road to redemption twisted onward, demanding one final stand, a ride into the heart of corruption, where loyalty would forge justice from the unyielding steel of chosen bonds, ensuring Maya's memory of safety became her forever anchor. The sun dipped low over the pine-rimmed horizon, bathing the clubhouse in a golden haze that turned the gravel courtyard into a sea of amber flecks. Smoke from the dying grills curled lazily upward, carrying the fading scent of charred meat and herbs, while the low murmur of voices wove through the air like threads of a closing tapestry. Caleb stood at the edge of the porch, arms folded, watching Maya chase fireflies in the twilight garden, her laughter a fragile melody against the deepening dusk. The bear from Lena dangled forgotten in her hand, its fur dusted with pollen from the wildflowers she'd gathered earlier. For the first time since the storm, her steps were light, unshadowed, as if the weight of hidden fears had begun to lift. Inside the garage, the laptop's screen cast a cool blue glow on Rico's face, his fingers pausing over the keys as the final pieces clicked into place. The paralegal sister, Maria, a sharp-eyed woman with a stack of legal pads and a no-nonsense braid, leaned in, her voice a hushed anchor amid the clutter of tools and oil cans. "It's airtight," she said, tapping the document. Emails, bank transfers, foster parents siphoning aid funds, complaints quashed by a mid-level clerk on the take. No direct ties to violence, but the neglects documented. Locked rooms, skipped meals, kids vanishing into the shuffle. Maya's file buried to protect the operation. Caleb absorbed it, the words settling like road dust, stirring the quiet fury of a man who'd seen systems fail those who needed them most. No dramatic raids or clashes, just the steady unraveling of lies, powered by networks that badges couldn't reach. Jax paced nearby, his boots scuffing the concrete floor. the faint creak of leather punctuating his thoughts. "Hale's got the report. Pushed it up the chain this morning. No more roadblocks." He clapped Caleb on the back, the gesture solid, echoing the Brotherhood's unspoken creed: stand for the fallen, honor the forgotten. Outside, the convoy had dispersed, bikes parked in neat rows like resting guardians, their chrome dulled by the evening dew. The air cooled, carrying the crisp bite of nightfall, mingled with the earthy perfume of turned soil from the garden. As stars pricked the velvet sky, Officer Hale arrived alone, her cruiser rolling to a stop with a soft crunch, headlights cutting through the gloom before flicking off. She stepped out, uniform crisp despite the long day, a manila folder tucked under her arm. No entourage, no bluster, just the quiet resolve of someone who'd chosen truth over the easier path. Caleb met her at the gate, the chain link cool against his palm. Maya's voice calling from the porch in a mix of curiosity and caution. "Everything squared?" he asked, voice low, the wind rustling the pines like a whispered approval. Hale nodded, handing over the folder, its edges worn from hurried hands. Charges filed against the foster couple and the clerk. Federal eyes now. Bigger fish to fry. Maya's case. Custody review fast-tracked. Your involvement. It tipped the scales. Witnesses from the bus crash corroborated your story, anonymous rescuer or not. Courts inclined to temporary guardianship with you, pending full adoption if it fits. Her eyes softened, reflecting the first true stars, a flicker of respect for the man who turned solitude into sanctuary. You didn't have to ride this far, Ward, but you did. Caleb took the folder, the paper crisp under his calloused fingers, but his gaze drifted to Maya, who approached barefoot, grass clinging to her toes. "Promised her once," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of years. The ravine, the wreckage, the child's desperate eyes mirroring his own losses. The war that stole his brother, the roads that mended the fractures, the club that became the family he'd rebuild for her. No fanfare, just the moral victory of standing firm, where justice emerged not from thunder, but from the unyielding grip of loyalty. Maya reached them, slipping her hand into Caleb's. The folder forgotten as she looked up at Hale with wide, trusting eyes. "Can I stay? With the Knights?" The question hung innocent, piercing the night's hush, and Hale knelt, the gravel biting her knees, her smile genuine amid the shadows. "Looks like it, kid. You got a good one here." She rose, nodding to Caleb, the exchange sealing an alliance forged in the quiet hours. As her taillights faded down the drive, the compound exhaled, the tension uncoiling like a spring released. That night, the great room glowed with lantern light, casting warm pools over the scarred oak table where the brothers gathered, not for strategy, but stories. Lena served stew steaming with root vegetables and herbs, the aroma wrapping the space in comfort, while Maya sat cross-legged on a rug, bare in lap, absorbing the tales. Jax's first ride after the war, Rico's flood rescue, the unbreakable chains that linked them. Caleb watched from his chair, the fire crackling in the hearth, embers popping like distant memories. The girl's face, illuminated by the flames, held no more shadows, just the spark of belonging, a redemption woven from simple acts. Dawn broke clear the next morning, the sun rising like a benediction over the pines, gilding the bikes as the convoy reformed, not for flight, but a gentle escort to the county office 30 miles south. Caleb rode with Maya in the van, her head against his arm, the road humming beneath them in a rhythm of promise fulfilled. Papers signed, oaths renewed in quiet chambers. The judge's gavel, a soft echo of finality. Guardianship granted, the path to forever open, not through battles won with force, but the deeper strength of chosen kin. Back at the clubhouse, as engines roared in celebration, a subdued parade circling the yard, dust swirling in joyful vortices, Caleb lifted Maya onto his bike seat for the first time, her legs dangling. hands on the handlebars like a pilot's. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of freedom and fresh earth as the brothers flanked them, vests gleaming in the light. "Ready for the road, kid?" he asked, voice thick with the legacy of honor. She nodded, eyes bright as the horizon. "With you? Always." In that moment, the promise closed its circle, not a forgotten whisper from a rainy night, but a living bond etched in loyalty's steel. The iron promise rode on, guardians of the lost, their quiet courage a beacon against the cynicism, ensuring no child walked alone. Redemption wasn't a destination, but the miles traveled together, family forged in the fire of unwavering truth. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. If these tales of honor and heart touched you, hit that subscribe button and join the family. More stories of quiet heroes await on the road ahead.